The video lesson for section 9.7 part 3. I know it's weird to have a three-parter for the video lesson, and I wasn't going to do this particular part. I was going to leave the 9.7 as it was, but after the insistence of one of my students and the help that she provided, I'm going to teach you another method of doing the 9.7 factorization problems. It's called the diamond method. The book doesn't teach it. Again, I was going to just briefly go over it and not really concentrate too much over it, but after we looked at it together, I think it has its uses. In some problems, it's a better method. And if you like it, you're more than welcome to use it. Again, I'm not going to force it on anyone. So if you want to use with the trial and error method that I was going through and I was explaining in the other video lessons, and the majority of the homework problems are done that way, you're more than welcome to use that method. But this method is useful. It's a bit more complicated, but on harder problems, it's actually shorter. It's called the diamond method. And here I have a sample problem. It's a trinomial with a constant in front of the variable. So it's the same ones that we've done in 9.7. You can't factor anything out. None of the numbers have anything in common, so nothing to be factored out. So you literally have to just factor that trinomial out. Now with the diamond method, you draw this x. So I already drew that for you. And then you're going to fill 4 numbers inside this x. There's going to be a number that goes here, 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 and here. On the bottom is the easiest number. It's that middle constant. The middle constant here, the middle number, the coefficient, 13, goes on the bottom. On the top, in this position, goes the product of the first coefficient and the very last number. So in this case, it's 2 times -7, which is -14. So once again, the 13 at the bottom, and the positions have to be right. The number on the bottom comes from the 13 here, the middle coefficient. The number of the top, the 14, comes from multiplying the first term and the last term together. So 2 times -7 gives you the -14. On the sides, and here it doesn't really matter which side each of these go on, you will have 2 numbers. These numbers have to add up to 13 and multiply to -14. So this is kind of similar to what we've been doing, so it's not totally different. So 2 numbers that add up to 13, positive 13, yet multiply to -14. And you don't have too many choices. I mean, 14 can be 2 times 7, or it can be 1 times 14. There's no way you can get a 13 out of a 2 and a 7, which leaves us with the 14 and 1. And since the 13 is positive, we are going to have 14 here and a -1 here. So 14 and a -1, if combined, they give you 13. If multiplied, they give you -14. So now we have our diamond set up. Great, terrific. What do we do next? That wasn't so bad. I'm going to rewrite this equation right over here. 2h squared plus 13h. Not an equation, an expression. No equal sign. Next step is to split the middle term. So we're going to split it up. Now the 13h can be split into very different ways, but specifically I'm going to split it using the 2 side numbers of the diamond. And you're like, what does that look like? Let me show you. The first term doesn't change. Then you will have 2 terms for the middle. You're splitting it. It's going to split into a positive 14h and a -1h. And mathematically, the split has to work. 14h minus an h gives you back 13h. So we didn't really change anything. We just rewrote the problem. Next step, my bad. Next step, I'm going to separate these 2 monomials and these 2 monomials in their own separate parentheses. And this is what it looks like. So I'm going to write a parenthesis here, I'm going to write a parenthesis here. This is not like the parentheses before because I'm not having the parentheses multiply because obviously there's no multiplication signs. So I'm going to have 2h squared plus 14h in the first parenthesis plus negative h, I'm just going to skip the 1, minus 7 in the second parenthesis. Then I'm going to take a look at this parenthesis here, the first one, and I'm going to see if I can factor something out. And I can. Specifically, I can factor out a 2h. I'm going to color coordinate this because colors are pretty. So once you factor out a 2h, what do you have left? You have an h plus 7. Next, I'm going to see if I can factor out anything here. Specifically, I want this parenthesis to look just like this parenthesis. Well, if I factor out a negative 1, I probably should have done the negative in pink as well. Oh well, too bad. If I factor out a negative, if you remember from the start of the video lesson, if you factor out a negative, everything inside the parenthesis changes signs. So now you have an h plus 7. Alright, so we've been doing a lot of work, so what's next? Should have done that in orange too. Alright, so what's next is you are going to create a brand new parenthesis that will include your GCFs, whatever you factored out, 2h minus 1, and the other parenthesis will contain one of these. Doesn't matter, they're identical, so it doesn't matter which one you pick. And you're done. That's it. That's the answer. Now, could have used the trial and error method? Of course you could have. But you may or may not get the right combination on the first time. Because here you could have had the 2h here, the 2h here, the 7 here, the 7 here, positive here, negative here. You didn't know. With the trial and error method, if you got lucky, you could have gotten down the first time. If you got unlucky, you might have taken 3 or 4 times to get to the right answer. So this is longer initially, but it always gives you the right answer from the first time. So in more complicated problems, this is definitely the way to go. In simple problems, that's going to be up to you. But all around, I don't really care which method you use, as long as you can show me work and support your reasoning. So once again, if you have a trinomial like this, and you can always use the trial method, but if you don't want the trial and error method, set up your diamond. The middle term, whatever the middle term, the coefficient is, in this case it's 13, goes here. On the top, you have the first and last terms multiplied, and the product goes on the top, so 2 times negative 7, 14. On the sides, you'll have 2 numbers, and the negative 1 could have been here, the 14 could have been here, that doesn't make a difference. So you're either going, so you're going to have 2 numbers that add up to 13, yet multiply to negative 14. In this case, it was 14 and negative 1. 14 minus 1 is 13. 14 times negative 1 is negative 14. And you use these 2 numbers to split that middle term. So the middle term goes from 13h to a 14h and a negative h. Then now you have 4 monomials. 1, 2, 3, 4. You separate them to groups of 2. The first 2 go together, the other 2 go together. And then in each monomial you factor something out. You start with this one, factor out what else you have. And if it doesn't look like you're not sure what you can factor in the second one, look in this parenthesis. You want these two to be identical. So in this case, if I factored out a negative, they would become identical. And I did that. Once you do this, you take your 2 factors. They become your first binomial. And one of the parentheses, because they're identical, becomes your second binomial. And that is your answer. So thank you very much. And if you have any more questions, please see me in class or after school or at lunch or before school.